Welcome back, everybody, to linuxacademy.com. My name is Jerry, and in today's course, we continue with Jenkins Quick Start. All right, so we've installed and configured our system, and now we've also prepared our system for running commands as the Jenkins user on the local and remote node. So let's go ahead and get started with our first build. It's a very simple build, but it'll tell us a couple of things. So first thing is since we're logged into Jenkins, if we go over here to the Manage Jenkins, there's all kinds of things we can get here, from configuring the system, and for the most part, at least for our purposes for this course, all of the defaults are fine. We're not going to be changing SSH or the number of executors because we're only dealing with one or two nodes at a time. And we're going to take a look at managing our plugins in the next video. So for right now, all of our defaults are fine. So when you've logged in, you're going to be presented here, and this is the default dashboard for your Jenkins console. The first thing that we want to do is we want to create a new item. Now, is this item going to be a freestyle project, a pipeline, an external job, a folder, a multi-configuration project, a GitHub organization, multi-branch pipeline, and there will be more if you install different kinds of plugins that'll give you access to different things. So let's create a container that stores nested items in it. We'll create a folder. So we'll call this My Builds. And in this, all we're going to say is these are the test builds for the Jenkins Quick Start Linux Academy course. And then we'll save it. The status of our system at this point is just that we have this test build. There's nothing for us to do. But once we go in here, we can create a new item, and it takes us back to here. So the freestyle project, it allows us to do basically anything that we want. What do we want to do in here? So this particular field is just a folder for us to store information in. So let's create a new job. Freestyle project, My First Build. This is where we're actually going to do the build. And this will take us to the detail page for creating that build. All we're going to worry about now is there's all kinds of tabs here at the top. We have source code management that'll give us, it'll just take us to that particular section of the build. We're just going to leave it on general. And we'll put, for My First Build, we want to get the log output for the system. We can discard old builds. It might be a GitHub project, but let's go ahead and skip all of that. We're not going to worry about build triggers or anything. We're going to go all the way down here, and we're going to add a build step. And the build step that we're going to do is executing a shell. This is the simplest thing that we can do as far as our builds. And we're just going to execute a command. So let's do cat on var log messages. And that's it. If we wanted to see a list of environment variables that Jenkins provides our scripts in order to help us out if we need to refer to any of them, we can simply click on them and it'll tell us. If we need to provide any environment variables, we can either call a script directly, or we can provide and pass in the environment variables from here. In this case, I'm just going to save my build. And then once the build has been saved, we're in the project. So we're in the folder, My Test Build. These are the test builds. And this is the build itself. And there's two ways we can run it. We can click on the name and then click Build Now. Or from here, we can click on Schedule a Build for My First Build right here. So once we've added the My First Build, whether we go in here or whether we go over here, it'll give us a status. And in this case, it says that it failed. Well, why did it fail? Well, let's go here to, if we look at our build history, We can go into the results here, or we could go into our workspace and we can go to the last build itself, and then we go to console output. And the console output says cat var log messages permission denied. Okay, then we'll go back to our project. We go back to configure. And then what happens if we add sudo, because if you remember, when we created the Jenkins user and allowed it to log into any system without a password, we did give it sudo rights. So let's go ahead and hit save. And now we can do a build now. And it still failed. So let's click on it here, go to the console output. It says, sorry, you must have a TTY to run sudo. Well, that sounds weird. What does that mean? Well, because we're running the command in the background, there's no terminal for it to display its output to. So in order to display the output so that we can capture it as plain text and allow the shell script to complete, because what Jenkins is effectively doing is it's taking our console, or it's taking our build itself, it's creating a temporary workspace in varlib Jenkins workspace, and it in the temporary directory, it's executing a shell to shell out and run an actual shell script. And all that shell script contains is the commands within our shell build. But it doesn't have any TTY in order to run it. What in the world does that mean? Well, by default, SSH comes configured with require required TTY from your SSH configuration file. And the reason that that is set up that way is because typically you're going to have a terminal or a TTY associated with your login. That's how it grabs the console for being able to print output to the screen. So it requires that. Let's go to vi sudo. Let's do an su dash and go into our root account rather and do a vi sudo. And all we're going to search for is require TTY. And rather than capitals, I believe it's all lowercase. So we see defaults require TTY. So since it's a directive in here that by default will require TTY, even if we comment this out, it's still going to require a TTY. Now we can, TTY rather, we can disable it per command, or we can disable it overall. So all we have to do to disable it in general is do an exclamation point for require TTY, because it'll set not to require a TTY. It will not affect your system in any way, shape, or form. This is just a way of accommodating our ability to run scripts in the background in our Jenkins builds. So now if we come back over here and go back to the project and click on Build Now, then the next time we refresh, we get this little blue icon and it says success. So if we click on it and we go to the console output, we'll see that it was able to sudo cat var log messages, and then it's going to display all of the messages that are in that particular log file. So this is a way for us to create builds by executing, in this case, arbitrary SSH commands through a shell on our system. This is one way to do a basic build. For the most part, you're going to do more complex builds than that, but I wanted to show you how you can create your first build, because you can do all kinds of cool stuff just like this. If this is all you ever used Jenkins for, you could schedule things to happen on your system through Jenkins, or write all of these things out that may need to happen as part of your projects and then run them on demand. We can schedule them and then we can run them on demand. And doing it all through SSH, you could still take advantage of a number of different toolkits, whether they be Ansible or Salt or Git. Anything you can do at the command line, we can do here. We can also encapsulate a whole bunch of stuff into our own scripts and then run them remotely whenever we want. We'll also look at how we can run commands from this master to a remote host in a future video. But what we're going to talk about next, we're going to talk about those plugins that we installed at the beginning and how to install new ones and how they give us new functionality and how we use them going forward with Jenkins. However, this is an example of how to structure and configure our first build, troubleshoot it when it doesn't work, resolve the situation, and then look at the successful console output that is our first build in Jenkins. So for our first build in Jenkins, that's all there is to it. My name is Terry for Linux Academy.